I didn't know who yet, but the air in the room had shifted in that way it does when the world is about to turn on its axis. I was 62 years old, sitting in my rented room above a Korean grocery store in South Boston, watching the rain streak down windows that hadn't been properly cleaned since Carter was president. The fluorescent sign from the store below pulsed through the thin curtains, washing everything in a pale blue that made my hands look ghostly. The phone, a flip model I'd bought at a gas station because smartphones were for people who had someone to call, buzzed against the particle board table I'd salvaged from a curb 3 years back. It was one of those small, vibrating hums that seem louder than any ringtone when the night's too quiet. I stared at it for a moment, watching it jitter like it wanted to escape. A single ring. 2. On the third, I flipped it open, the old hinge creaking like a joint that hadn't been used in years. "Yeah," I said, my voice rough with the gravel of late hours and cheap whiskey. "Mr. Harrow?" The voice was young, female, professionally steady in that way that means something has gone catastrophically wrong. "This is Boston Metro General. Your grandson asked us to call you." My grandson, Michael. The sound of his name was enough to make my throat tighten, though I hadn't spoken it aloud in months. 17 years ago, I'd walked into a state-run shelter on a tip from a social worker who owed me a favor. The kind of favor that makes you complicit in the beautiful lie that people are better than they are. I'd cashed it in because of a rumor, one about a skinny, silent teenager sleeping under fluorescent lights and government blankets, a boy who looked like me when I was 15 and had already decided the world didn't have a place for me in it. The boy I found there weighed 93 pounds at 15 years old. He had a bruise on his cheek shaped like his stepfather's college ring, 3 cracked ribs that had healed wrong, and eyes that had already learned not to expect anything good from the universe. He sat on his cot, with his hands folded neatly in his lap, like he was afraid to take up too much space. When he looked at me, I saw something that made me feel both guilty and furious: resignation. He didn't know who I was yet, but he already knew I wasn't going to save him. My daughter Emma had put him there. Not physically. She was too smart for that, too image-conscious. She'd simply married a man who hated the reminder that she'd had a life before him, and when her son became inconvenient, she'd made a choice: the shelter or nothing. She chose nothing. I never asked her how she justified it to herself. I already knew the answer. People like Emma don't justify things. They just move on and pretend the parts they broke never existed. "What happened?" I asked the nurse. "There's been an accident, a serious one. Your grandson he's the attending surgeon on duty, but the patient is..." "Spit it out." "It's his mother, Mr. Harrow. Emma Harrow. She was in a car accident on the Pike. Major internal bleeding, possible traumatic brain injury. She's critical. He has maybe 10 minutes to prep for surgery, and he asked us to call you first." I sat there in my chair, feeling the cold seep up from the floorboards. The rain against the window blurred the world into streaks of grey. Outside, a drunk couple argued in Portuguese. A car alarm wailed and died, the city breathing its late-night breath of violence and mundane tragedy. I'd lived long enough to know that every city, no matter how big, has the same heartbeat after midnight, slow, tired, and full of secrets. "Tell him I'm coming," I said. I hung up and looked at my hands. Ex-paramedic hands, scarred and steady. I'd held together more broken bodies than I could count in 30 years on the rigs. I'd seen every way a human being can betray another human being, and I'd learned that sometimes the worst betrayals don't leave marks you can photograph for evidence. The job had taught me how fragile people really were, how easily flesh gives way under pressure, how quickly a pulse can fade beneath your fingertips. Emma had left marks on her son that would never show up on any X-ray, but I'd seen them all the same. And now she was lying on a gurney in his ER, bleeding out, with only him standing between her and whatever comes next. I grabbed my coat, the same canvas jacket I'd worn the night I pulled Michael out of that shelter, and headed for the door. My car was a 1998 Civic with 200,000 miles and a passenger door that only opened from the inside. It smelled faintly of gasoline and rain-damp leather, and the radio hadn't worked since the Obama years. I fired it up and pointed it toward the hospital, driving through rain that turned the streetlights into smeared halos. The windshield wipers groaned with every sweep, a tired rhythm that matched the pounding in my chest. The thing about revenge is that people think it's hot. But real revenge is cold. Real revenge isn't about destruction, it's about survival. It's about outliving the people who made you small and helpless, about mastering the world that once crushed you. Real revenge is a choice you make in an operating room at midnight while your mother's heart rate drops and the monitors scream and everyone is watching to see what kind of man you've become. I'd saved that boy 17 years ago because someone had to. Because I'd looked at my daughter and realized she'd inherited something broken from me. Some inability to love without conditions. Some refusal to forgive herself or anyone else. I'd tried to fix it by fixing him instead. I taught him how to tie a tie, how to keep his hand steady under pressure, how to look someone in the eye and see the truth they were trying to hide. But I also taught him how to hate quietly, how to hold a grudge like a blade kept sharp in the dark. Maybe that was my real mistake. Now I was about to find out if I'd succeeded or just passed the damage down one more generation. The hospital rose out of the rain like a lit monument to human suffering. The windows glowed white against the black sky, rows of sterile lights stacked like confessionals. I parked in a loading zone and walked through the ER entrance, my shoes squeaking on linoleum that smelled like disinfectant and desperation. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of bleach and fear. Monitors beeped, nurses shouted codes in clipped voices, and the waiting room was full of people trying not to look at each other. Hospitals always feel like purgatory. Everyone there waiting to find out which direction their story is about to go. At the reception desk, a nurse looked up, her expression weary but kind. "Can I help you, sir?" "I'm here for Dr. Michael Harrow," I said. "He's operating on Emma Harrow." Her eyes flickered with something like recognition. Maybe she'd seen the resemblance. "He's in surgery now," she said softly. "You can wait in the family room." Family. The word tasted strange in my mouth. I hadn't been part of a family in decades. I sat down in one of the molded plastic chairs that lined the walls. The clock above the vending machines ticked loud enough to make me wish I could stop hearing it. I tried to picture Michael in that operating room. Gloved hands, focused eyes, the sound of suction and monitors, and a dozen people moving around him in controlled chaos. I'd seen that kind of pressure before. You don't think, you just act. And somewhere in all that noise, you have to keep your own demons quiet enough to hear the rhythm of the heart you're trying to save. When he was younger, Michael used to shadow me on ambulance calls. He'd sit in the back, silent, watching as I wrapped gauze around gunshot wounds or splintered, shattered bones. He never flinched. Once, after a particularly bad call, a kid about his age who didn't make it, I found him outside the rig, sitting on the curb, staring at his hands. "You can't save them all," I told him. "You just do what you can and hope it's enough." He nodded, but even then, I could see the way he took it personally, the way he filed every loss somewhere deep inside. I should have known he'd end up in medicine. The wounded always try to become healers. Hours passed like minutes. The rain eased, then started again. Somewhere down the hall, a baby cried, a raw sound that made the air feel too fragile. At 2:13 a.m., a door opened and Michael walked out. His surgical cap hung loose around his neck, his scrubs soaked through with sweat. His face was grey, eyes hollow. For a moment, he didn't see me. Then he did. "Grandpa," he said, voice breaking on the word. I stood. "How is she?" He looked down at his hands, flexed them once as if they belonged to someone else. "We stopped the bleeding, but there was too much trauma. Brain swelling, crushed ribs, liver lacerations. We stabilized her for now, but she might not make it through the night. He swallowed hard, then met my gaze. She looked at me before she went under. She knew who I was. Did she say anything? He shook his head. Just my name. There was a silence between us that said everything words couldn't. But I could see the conflict in his eyes, the part of him that wanted to save her, and the part that wanted her to feel every ounce of pain she'd given him. I knew that feeling too well. You did your job, I said quietly. That's what matters. He nodded, but the set of his jaw told me he didn't believe it. Maybe, he said, or maybe I just played God and didn't know what to pray for. He sat beside me, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. We didn't speak for a long time. Outside, the first light of dawn broke through the rain clouds, turning the wet pavement gold. Somewhere in that light, I thought about Emma as a little girl, laughing, running barefoot through the yard, hair tangled and wild. I remembered teaching her to ride a bike, holding the back of the seat as she wobbled forward, the way she looked back once to make sure I was still there. I wasn't, not really, not the way she needed. Maybe that's where it all started, the slow erosion of trust, the inheritance of damage. Michael stood. They'll let us know if anything changes. I nodded, watching as he walked away down the sterile hallway, his shoulders straight, his steps sure. A man forged in pain, tempered by duty. Maybe that was his revenge after all, not letting the past define him, but mastering it one heartbeat at a time. I hoped he'd find peace in that. I wasn't sure I ever would. Before we go any further, hit the hype button, take a second to subscribe, and like the video. It really helps the channel grow. And tell us in the comments, what would you do in this situation? The ER waiting room at Boston Metro General looked like a holding pen for the American dream gone wrong. The fluorescent lights turned everyone's skin the color of old newspaper. I walked straight to the desk. The nurse who'd called me looked up, and I saw recognition flash across her face. "4th floor, surgical wing," she said. "He's in OR3, but you can't—" I know where I can't go. The surgical floor was quieter, calmer. This was where they brought you after the screaming stopped, after the immediate crisis became a long-term problem. A resident I didn't know intercepted me outside the OR observation area. "Family only," he said. "I'm his grandfather. Michael Harrow's grandfather." The resident's expression shifted. He glanced toward the OR doors, then back at me. "He said you might come. He said, look, this is complicated." "Everything's complicated. That's why God invented surgeons. The patient is his mother." "I know. She's critical. Ruptured spleen, liver laceration, possible intracranial bleed. She was doing 90 on the pike in the rain, lost control, hit the median barrier, and rolled 3 times. Of course, Emma had always driven fast, lived fast, made decisions fast. The only thing she'd ever done slowly was abandon her son, and that had taken 3 years of small cruelties before the final act. "Can he save her?" I asked. The resident looked uncomfortable. "Technically, yes, probably. He's one of the best trauma surgeons we have, but she's his mother, and everyone's wondering if he's going to let her bleed out on principle." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." I pushed past him and walked to the observation window. Through the glass, I could see the OR, bright lights, green-gowned figures, the organized chaos of emergency surgery, and in the center, standing over the table, was Michael. He'd grown tall, 6'2", maybe 6'3". The skeletal 15-year-old was gone, replaced by a man with steady hands, and the kind of focus that comes from learning early that the universe doesn't give you second chances. I watched him work, watched his hands move with brutal precision, cutting, clamping, suturing. Watched him save the woman who'd thrown him away like damaged furniture. The resident came up beside me. He hasn't said a word since they brought her in. Just scrubbed in and started working. It's been 40 minutes. How long does she have? If he keeps going like this, she'll make it, Probably end up in ICU for a week, but she'll live. I nodded slowly. And if he stops? The resident didn't answer. He didn't have to. 17 years earlier, I'd driven to that shelter in a borrowed van because my Civic's passenger door was already broken and I didn't know if the boy would be able to climb out by himself. The social worker, a woman named Patricia who'd worked 6 double shifts that week, met me at the door. "He's in the back dormitory," she said. "Bed 14. Mr. Harrow, I have to tell you, he's not in good shape." I've seen not good shape. Not like this. Your daughter and her husband, when they brought him here, they said he was violent, uncontrollable. We had to put him in the secured area. I'd felt something cold settle into my chest. And he's the quietest kid we have. Doesn't talk, doesn't fight, doesn't cry. He just exists, like he's waiting for permission to take up space. I found him sitting on a thin mattress, staring at a water stain on the ceiling. He was wearing clothes that hung off his frame like they were designed for a different species. When I said his name, he flinched. "I'm your grandfather," I told him. "Your mother's father. I'm here to take you home." He looked at me with those eyes, 15 years old and already ancient. "She sent you?" "No." "Then I'm not going." "Kid, you don't have a choice. This place isn't a home. It's a warehouse for broken furniture. I'm not going back to her." "You're not. You're coming with me." He studied my face for a long time. Then he said, "Why?" It was a fair question. I'd barely seen him since he was 10, since Emma had remarried and made it clear that her new life didn't include reminders of her old one. I'd been angry about it, sure, but anger is easy. Action is hard. "Because someone has to," I said. "Because I know what it's like to watch someone you love choose something else over you. And because if I don't get you out of here, I'm going to spend the rest of my life knowing I let it happen." He stood up. 93 pounds of damaged goods and survivor's instinct. "What's your place like?" "Small, cheap, clean enough. You'll have your own room." "Will she know where I am?" "Probably not. She didn't ask." He nodded, and something in his expression broke my heart worse than any trauma call I'd ever run. "Okay," he said. "Let's go." I took him home that night, fed him soup because his stomach couldn't handle anything solid, watched him eat like someone who'd learned that food is a privilege, not a right. Then I put him in the spare room, which was really just a closet with a futon, and told him he was safe now. He looked at me and said, "Nothing's safe." Smart kid. The surgery took 3 hours. I sat in the waiting area, watching other people's tragedies unfold around me. A woman crying into her phone in Spanish. An old man sleeping upright with his mouth open. A kid playing video games on his phone while his mother bled somewhere behind those sterile doors. At 2:47 a.m., Michael came through the OR doors. He pulled off his surgical cap and saw me sitting there. For a moment, we just looked at each other, grandfather and grandson, paramedic and surgeon, 2 men who'd learned the same lesson about saving lives. Sometimes the people you save don't deserve it, and sometimes that doesn't matter. "She's alive," he said. I heard. "ICU, critical but stable. She'll need another surgery tomorrow to check for internal bleeding, but she should make it." "Good work." He sat down in the chair next to me, suddenly looking exhausted. 24 hours on shift, I guessed. Maybe more. "You came," he said. "You called. I wasn't sure you would." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Standing there with the scalpel in my hand, watching her vitals drop and thinking, this is justice, this is karma, this is what she deserves. But you didn't. No, because you didn't raise me to be that person. You raised me to be better than the people who hurt me. I felt something twist in my chest. Pride, maybe, or grief, or both. "You saved her life," I said. "That's all that matters." "Is it?" He turned to look at me, and I saw the same boy I'd pulled out of that shelter, the one who'd asked me why anyone would bother. "Because I don't feel good about it, Gramps. I feel like I just let her off the hook for everything she did. You did your job. That's different from forgiveness. Then what's forgiveness look like? No idea. I'm still working on it myself. She's been asking for me, Michael said finally. Patricia, the nurse, says she's been conscious for about 20 minutes. Confused, in pain, but conscious. She keeps asking if her son is here. What did you tell her? Nothing yet. I wanted to talk to you first. Why? He looked down at his hands, surgeon's hands, steady and skilled. Hands that had just saved his mother's life, whether she deserved it or not. Because I don't know what to say to her. Because the last time I saw her, I was 15, and she was signing paperwork to put me in state custody. Because I've spent 17 years building a life she didn't want me to have, and now she's lying in a hospital bed, asking for me like none of that matters. Maybe it doesn't, I said, to her. But it matters to me. Then tell her that. He shook his head. I'm not ready. You just cut her open and stitched her back together. How much more ready can you get? That was medicine. This is personal. Kid, it's all personal. Every patient, every life, every choice. You just learn to pretend it isn't. I'd taught him that, actually. How to separate the person from the problem. How to look at a body on a gurney and see systems and symptoms instead of someone's daughter, someone's father, someone's reason for getting up in the morning. It was a Thursday afternoon when I'd taught him that lesson. He'd been with me for 3 months, gaining weight slowly, going to school, learning to trust that food and safety weren't things that could be taken away on a whim. We were in my apartment, 2 rooms above a Chinese restaurant, the smell of fried rice seeping through the floorboards. And he was doing homework at the kitchen table. Pre-calc. He was smart, smarter than anyone had bothered to notice when he was busy surviving. My old portable scanner, a relic from my paramedic days, crackled to life. Structure fire, 2 victims trapped, engine company requesting ALS backup. I listened out of habit, even though I'd turned in my certification years ago. Probably. Don't you want to help? Not my job anymore. But you could. You know how. I turned off the scanner. Knowing how and doing it are different things. I spent 30 years running toward emergencies. Now I'm tired. He went back to his homework, but I could see him thinking, processing. A week later, he asked me to teach him CPR, then basic first aid, then more advanced stuff, how to assess trauma, how to stop bleeding, how to keep someone alive long enough to get them to people with better equipment. Why do you want to know this? I asked him one night, watching him practice chest compressions on a borrowed dummy. Because people get hurt, he said, and someone has to know how to fix them. You can't fix everyone, but I can try. That's when I knew he'd be okay. Not happy, maybe, not undamaged, but okay. Because he'd figured out what it took me 30 years to learn. You don't save people because they deserve it. You save them because you can. At 3:15 a.m., Emma woke up screaming. I heard it from the waiting room, a sound that cut through the antiseptic calm of the surgical floor like a knife. Michael was in the hallway talking to a resident when it happened. He froze, his face going carefully blank. I should check on her, the resident said. I'll do it, Michael said. I stood up. Want company? He looked at me, and for a second I saw the 15-year-old again, the one who'd asked if his mother had sent me. Yeah, he said. I think I do. We walked down the hallway together, past rooms where other people's tragedies were playing out in slow motion. Emma's room was at the end, a private ICU suite because apparently she still had good insurance. Money she'd never sent to help raise her son, but enough to get her a room with a view. She was awake when we entered. Hooked up to machines, her face swollen and bruised, her right arm in a cast. She looked smaller than I remembered, older. But then I'd spent 17 years building her up into a monster in my mind, and monsters are always bigger in memory than in reality. Her eyes found Michael first. I watched recognition hit her like a physical blow. Michael, her voice was rough, damaged from the breathing tube. Are you? I'm your surgeon, he said. His voice was professional, distant. You were in a car accident, ruptured spleen, liver laceration, multiple fractures. We had to perform emergency surgery to control the bleeding. You're a surgeon. She tried to sit up, winced, fell back. You're a doctor? Trauma surgeon, 7 years now. She looked at him like he was a ghost, like he was impossible. I didn't know. I tried to find you after you abandoned me in a state shelter. The room went very quiet. Emma's eyes filled with tears, and I felt a surge of something hot and ugly in my chest. After all this time, she still knew how to play the victim. It wasn't like that, she said. You don't understand. Richard, my husband, he couldn't handle having you around. You reminded him that I'd been married before, that I had a whole life. So you threw me away. I put you in a safe place until I could figure things out. A safe place? Michael's voice was still calm, still professional, but I could hear the edge underneath. I was beaten, starved, and locked in a room with 15 other kids who'd been thrown away by their families. That's your definition of safe. Emma was crying now. Real tears, probably. She'd always been good at those. I was going to come back for you. I swear I was. But then Richard found out I'd been calling the shelter, and he said if I kept trying to contact you, he'd leave me. I couldn't lose him. I couldn't lose everything. So you chose him over me. I chose survival. No, Michael said, and his voice was cold as surgical steel. You chose comfort. There's a difference. I stood there watching them, feeling like I was witnessing something I shouldn't see. This was their moment, their confrontation. But Michael had asked me to come, and I wasn't going to leave him alone with her. Emma turned her head and saw me for the first time. Dad, you're here. Someone had to raise your son, I said, since you weren't interested. I didn't know you had him. The shelter never told me. You never asked. I checked. Her face crumpled. I was going to come back and what? Take him back? Pretend nothing happened? I stepped closer to her bed. You had a choice 17 years ago. You made it. Now you get to live with it. I was scared, she whispered. I was young and scared, and I made a mistake. You were 35 years old, Michael said. That's not young. That's old enough to know better. Please, Michael, please. I know I can't undo what I did, but I want to try. I want to make it right. He looked at her for a long time. Then he said, You're going to live. The surgery was successful. You'll need follow-up care, physical therapy, probably some counseling for the trauma. I've arranged for you to be transferred to a long-term care facility once you're stable. Will you come visit me? No. Michael, I saved your life tonight because that's my job. Because I took an oath to do no harm. But I don't owe you anything beyond that. You had a son once. You threw him away. Now you have a surgeon who kept you alive. Be grateful for that much. He turned and walked out. I followed him, leaving Emma crying in her expensive hospital bed. We ended up in the hospital cafeteria at 4 a.m., drinking coffee that tasted like it had been brewed sometime during the Clinton administration. Michael sat across from me, his surgeon's mask finally cracking. I wanted to hate her, he said, standing in that OR, looking down at her, knowing I could just walk away, let someone else handle it, and part of me wanted to. But you didn't. Because you taught me better, because you spent 17 years showing me that being better than the people who hurt you is the only revenge worth having. I took a sip of terrible coffee. That's a nice thought, but sometimes revenge is just revenge. You don't believe that. I used to. He smiled, tired and sad. What changed? I got old, realized that holding on to anger takes energy I don't have anymore. So you forgave her? No, I just stopped carrying her around in my head all the time. We sat in silence for a while. Around us, the cafeteria was nearly empty. A janitor mopped the floor in slow, methodical circles. A nurse grabbed a sandwich from the vending machine and left without sitting down. the hospital's night shift grinding on. She said she was going to come back for me, Michael said. People say a lot of things when they're scared and hurt. Do you think she meant it? I think she means it now. Whether she meant it then, that's a different question. He nodded slowly. I don't know if I can forgive her. I don't know if I want to. Then don't. Forgiveness isn't required. You saved her life. That's more than she deserved. Is it enough? That's not for me to answer. He looked at me across the table, and I saw 17 years collapse into a moment. The boy I'd pulled from that shelter, the man he'd become, the weight of a choice he'd had to make in an OR at midnight. Thank you, he said, for coming, for being here, for everything. You don't have to thank me for doing what I should have done years earlier. Yes, I do, because you did it anyway. We finished our coffee. Michael had to get back to his shift. There were other emergencies, other lives to save. I walked with him to the elevator, feeling every one of my 62 years in my knees. What are you going to do now? He asked. Go home. Sleep. Pretend my life is normal for a few hours. Will I see you soon? You know where I live. Same place I've always lived. He nodded and stepped into the elevator. Before the doors closed, he said, Gramps, if she asks about me again, if she wants to know where I am, who I became, tell her the truth. Tell her I'm the person you raised me to be. Which is better than her. The doors closed. I stood there for a moment, feeling something shift in my chest. Pride, maybe. Or just the exhaustion of carrying a grudge for 17 years and finally putting it down. The rain had stopped. The city was quiet in that pre-dawn way, like it was holding its breath between disasters. My Civic was still in the loading zone. I half expected a ticket, but either the hospital security had better things to do, or they recognized a fellow traveler when they saw one. I climbed in, started the engine, and sat there for a minute. Emma would recover. Michael would go on being a surgeon. I would go on being an old man in a rented room, living on a pension that barely covered rent and groceries. But tonight, for a few hours, I'd watched my grandson choose to be better than his pain, and I'd realized that maybe the best revenge isn't making people suffer. Maybe it's proving they were wrong about you. I drove home through empty streets, past closed shops and dark windows. The Korean grocery store below my apartment was locked up tight. I climbed the stairs, hearing them creak under my weight. Inside, I took off my coat and sat down in my chair. The same chair I'd been sitting in when the phone rang. The same chair I'd sat in for 17 years, watching a boy grow into a man, watching damage become strength. On the table next to me was an old photograph. Michael at 16, awkward and smiling, holding a certificate from his EMT training course. The first step toward becoming what he'd become. I'd kept it all these years, a reminder that saving one life can ripple out in ways you never expect. I picked up the photo and looked at it for a long time. Then I put it back down and closed my eyes. 3 days later, Emma called me. I didn't recognize the number, almost didn't answer. But something, curiosity, maybe, or just old instinct made me pick up. Dad? Her voice was stronger now, less damaged. It's me. I know. I need to talk to you. About Michael. About everything. There's nothing to talk about. Please, just 10 minutes. That's all I'm asking. I should have hung up. Should have deleted her number and gone back to my life. But I'd spent 17 years wondering what I'd say if I ever had the chance, and now the chance was here. I'll meet you, I said, but not at the hospital, and not for long. She gave me an address, a coffee shop in Cambridge, near the university. Neutral ground. I told her I'd be there in an hour. The drive took 40 minutes. I parked 2 blocks away and walked, giving myself time to figure out what I wanted to say. But by the time I got there, I still didn't know. Emma was sitting in a corner booth, wearing street clothes now. Her arm was still in a cast, her face still bruised, but she looked more like herself, more like the daughter I'd raised, before she'd become someone I didn't recognize. I sat down across from her, didn't order anything, just waited. "Thank you for coming," she said. "You've got 9 minutes left." She flinched. "I deserve that." "You deserve worse." "I know." She looked down at her coffee cup. "I've spent 3 days trying to figure out what to say to you, how to explain what I did, and I realized there's no explanation that makes it okay." "Then why are we here?" "Because I need you to know that I'm sorry, that I've been sorry for 17 years, that not a day went by when I didn't think about Michael, wonder where he was, if he was okay." "But you never came looking." "No, because I was a coward, because my husband convinced me that letting go was the kindest thing I could do, that Michael was better off without me." "He was." She looked up, and I saw genuine pain in her eyes. "You're right, he was, but that doesn't make it hurt less. You don't get to hurt about this. You gave up that right when you signed those papers." "I know, but I'm hurting anyway." We sat in silence. Around us, college students typed on laptops and discussed philosophy and argued about things that didn't matter. Young people who still thought the world made sense. "Michael is an incredible man," Emma said finally. "You raised him well." "I raised him, period. That's all I did." "It's more than I did." "Yes, it is." She took a shaky breath. "I don't expect forgiveness, from him or from you, but I wanted you to know what you did for him, taking him in, giving him a home. It's the only good thing that came out of my worst decision." "That's not good enough." "I know. He didn't deserve what you did to him. No kid deserves that." "I know. And now you want what? Absolution? Permission to feel less guilty?" "No. I don't know what I want. Maybe just to say it out loud, to acknowledge what I did, so it's not just this thing we all pretend didn't happen." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw someone who'd spent 17 years running from a choice she couldn't undo, someone who'd built a life on top of that choice and was only now realizing the foundation was rotten. "You can't fix this," I told her. "You can't go back and be his mother now. That chance is gone." "I know. And he doesn't need you. He's got a life, a career, a future. You're not part of it." "I know that too. Then what are you going to do?" She looked at me with something like hope. "Live with it. Try to be better. Maybe one day, if he ever wants to talk, I'll be ready." "Don't hold your breath." "I won't, but I'll be ready anyway." I stood up. My 9 minutes were up, and I'd said everything I needed to say. "Emma?" "Yeah?" "He saved your life. Remember that. When you're lying awake at night thinking about what you lost, remember that the boy you threw away grew up to be the man who saved you. And then ask yourself if you deserve that kind of mercy." I walked out before she could answer. I didn't need to hear it. A week later, Michael came over for dinner. We did this sometimes, not often, but when his schedule allowed. He'd bring Chinese takeout or pizza, and we'd sit in my cramped apartment and talk about nothing important. This time, he brought Thai food and a bottle of decent whiskey. "Celebrating something?" I asked. "Maybe, or processing, I'm not sure which." We ate in comfortable silence. He told me about his week, 2 successful surgeries, one that didn't go so well, the endless paperwork that came with saving lives. I told him about my week, a leak in the bathroom ceiling, a new tenant in the grocery store who played music too loud. Normal life. The kind of normal we'd built together over 17 years. "I've been thinking about her," Michael said finally, "about what you said, that saving her life was more than she deserved. It was. But it was also the right thing to do, not because of who she is, but because of who I am, who you taught me to be. I didn't teach you anything. You figured it out yourself. No, you taught me by example, every day for 17 years. You showed me that being angry is easy, being better is hard. I'm still angry, I admitted. I don't know if that ever goes away. Maybe it doesn't have to. Maybe you can be angry and still choose to be better. I poured us both whiskey. We sat there drinking it, two men who'd learned the same lesson from different angles. She wants to talk to me, Michael said. She's been leaving messages at the hospital. Nothing pushy, just letting me know she's available if I ever want to. Do you? I don't know. Part of me wants to tell her exactly what her absence cost me. Every missed birthday, every school event, every moment I needed a mother, and got silence instead. And the other part? The other part remembers that I'm a surgeon, that I see people at their worst every day, that everyone's carrying damage they didn't ask for. He took a sip of whiskey. I'm not ready to forgive her. Maybe I never will be. But I'm tired of letting her take up space in my head. That's fair. Is it? Because it feels like I'm letting her off easy. You're letting yourself off. There's a difference. He smiled at that. When did you get so wise? I'm not wise. I'm just old and tired of carrying things that don't belong to me. We finished the whiskey. Michael stayed until late, talking about work and life and plans for the future. He was thinking about taking a position at a hospital in Seattle, a promotion that would make him one of the youngest trauma directors in the country. It's a good opportunity, he said, but it means leaving Boston, leaving you. I'm not going anywhere. I know, that's what worries me. Kid, I'm 62, not 90. I can take care of myself. But who's going to take care of you? Same person who always has, me. He looked uncomfortable. After everything you did for me, it feels wrong to just leave. That's the point. I raised you so you could leave, so you could have a life that doesn't revolve around taking care of the old man who took you in. I leaned forward. Michael, you don't owe me anything. You never did. I didn't save you because I wanted something back. I saved you because it was the right thing to do. That's not how it feels. Then change how you feel. Take the job. Move to Seattle. Build something amazing. That's the best way to pay me back, by not needing to. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I'll think about it. Good. He left around midnight. I watched him walk to his car, a decent sedan now, not the junker he'd driven in medical school, and drive away. Then I went inside and sat in my chair, feeling the weight of 17 years settle around me like an old coat. 2 months later, Emma called again. This time, I answered on the first ring. No preamble, no small talk. Richard's mother, the woman who convinced him I should get rid of Michael. She's in hospice. And you're telling me this why? Because Richard finally told me the truth, about why he really wanted Michael gone. His mother, she had this idea about family purity, about not raising another man's child. She convinced him that keeping Michael around would ruin our marriage, ruin our reputation. So you sacrificed your son for a bigot's approval. Yes, and I can't take that back, but I wanted you to know. I'm leaving him. Richard, the marriage, all of it. I'm 47 years old, and I finally figured out what matters. Little late for that revelation. I know, but better late than never, right? I didn't answer. I didn't have an answer. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Emma continued. I wanted you to know that I'm trying to be better, that Michael was right when he said I chose comfort over him, and now I'm choosing differently. What do you want me to say? Nothing. I just wanted you to know. She hung up. I sat there, holding the phone, feeling something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness, not acceptance, just acknowledgement that people can change, even if it doesn't fix what they broke. Michael took the job in Seattle. He called me from the airport, waiting for his flight, sounding nervous and excited and guilty all at once. You're doing the right thing, I told him. Then why does it feel wrong? Because you're a good person. Good people feel guilty about things they shouldn't. You're going to be okay, right? You'll call if you need anything. I've been okay for 62 years. I think I can manage. Gramps, Michael, I'm proud of you, more proud than I know how to say. Now get on that plane and go save some lives. He promised to call when he landed, to visit on holidays, to stay in touch, and I knew he would, because that's the kind of man he'd become. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment and thought about the night I'd pulled him from that shelter. And now he was flying across the country to run a trauma department, to save hundreds of lives, to be the person Emma had never let him become. That was revenge. Not the hot kind, not the violent kind, but the kind that mattered. The kind that said, you thought I was worthless, and I proved you wrong by becoming invaluable. 6 months after Michael moved to Seattle, Emma showed up at my door. I almost didn't recognize her. She'd lost weight, cut her hair short, was wearing jeans and a plain jacket instead of the designer clothes she'd always favored. Can I come in? She asked. Why? Because I'm your daughter, because I want to talk to you, because I've been going to therapy 3 times a week and my therapist thinks facing you is part of healing. Your healing isn't my problem. I know, but can I come in anyway? I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, looking around like she'd never seen the place before. And maybe she hadn't. I couldn't remember the last time she'd visited. It's smaller than I remembered, she said. It's the same size it's always been. She sat on my couch, the one I'd bought at a yard sale 12 years ago, and looked at me. I left Richard, filed for divorce last month. He wasn't happy about it. I don't care. I know. But I wanted you to know anyway. That I finally did something right, even if it's too late to matter. What do you want, Emma? I want to know if there's any chance, any at all, that you might forgive me someday. I sat down in my chair, looked at my daughter and saw a stranger, someone who shared my DNA but had made choices I couldn't understand. Forgiveness isn't something you earn, I said. It's something you accept not getting. You want me to forgive you? Stop asking for it. Stop trying to make yourself feel better about what you did. Just live with it. That's what the rest of us have to do. That's not fair. Life's not fair. If it was, your son wouldn't have spent 3 years being beaten by a man you married. If it was fair, I wouldn't have had to choose between retirement and raising a teenager. If it was fair, you'd have been a better mother. I leaned forward. But here's what is fair. You get to live knowing you made a choice. And now you get to live with the consequences. Just like everyone else. She was crying. I didn't comfort her. He saved my life, she said softly. The boy I threw away saved my life. How do I live with that? Carefully, gratefully, and knowing that you'll never deserve it. She nodded, wiped her eyes, and stood up. Thank you for being honest. That's all I've got left. She walked to the door, then turned back. For what it's worth, Michael is lucky to have you. No, I'm lucky to have him. There's a difference. She left. I watched her go, feeling nothing. Not anger, not pity, not satisfaction. Just nothing. And maybe that was its own kind of peace. A year later, Michael called with news. He was engaged. To another surgeon, a woman named Sarah who specialized in pediatric trauma. I want you at the wedding, he said. Front row. Walking me down the aisle, since I never had a father to do it. I'm not your father. No, you're better. You're the person who chose me when no one else did. The wedding was in Seattle. Small, intimate, just close friends and colleagues. I flew out, my first time on a plane in 20 years, and stayed in a hotel that Michael paid for over my objections. At the ceremony, I stood next to him while he married a woman who looked at him the way everyone deserves to be looked at, with love and respect, and no conditions attached. Emma wasn't there. Michael hadn't invited her, and I respected that choice. Some bridges don't need to be rebuilt. At the reception, Michael gave a speech. He thanked everyone for coming, thanked Sarah for loving him, and then he turned to me. 17 years ago, he said, I was in a shelter, waiting to disappear, and then my grandfather showed up and decided I was worth saving. It's about choice. It's about showing up when it matters and staying when it's hard. He taught me to be a surgeon by being the best paramedic I ever knew, and he taught me to be a man by being the kind of grandfather every kid deserves. He raised his glass. To David Harrow, the man who saved my life long before I knew how to save anyone else's. Everyone applauded. I sat there feeling uncomfortable and proud and grateful all at once. After the reception, after the dancing and cake and celebration, Michael found me on the hotel balcony, looking out at the Seattle skyline. "Thank you," he said, "for everything, for coming, for all of it." "You're welcome." "I mean it, Gramps. You didn't have to do any of what you did. You could have let me rot in that shelter. Instead, you gave me a life." "I gave you a chance. You made the life." "Same thing." "No, it's not. You did the work. I just kept you alive long enough to do it." He smiled. "You're impossible to thank properly, you know that?" "Good. I don't want thanks. I want you to be happy." "I am, because of you." We stood there in comfortable silence, watching the city lights. Then he said, "She's been writing to me. Emma. Emails mostly. Nothing pushy. Just updates on her life. How therapy's going. What she's doing differently. You don't have to respond. I know, and I haven't. But I'm glad she's trying. Even if it's too late. It is too late. Maybe, but at least she's trying." I looked at my grandson, 32 years old, married, successful, whole, and felt something settle in my chest. Not closure, not forgiveness, just completion. Like a circle finally closing after 17 years. "You're going to be okay," I said. "I already am okay, because you made sure of it." I flew home the next day. Back to Boston, back to my apartment, back to my life. It was smaller without Michael in it, quieter, but that was okay. I'd raised him to leave, and he'd left. That was success, not failure. A month later, I got a letter. Not from Michael, from Emma. Handwritten on nice stationery, the kind that came from a store that charged too much for paper. "Dear Dad," it started, "I don't expect you to respond to this. I don't expect anything from you anymore. But I needed to write it anyway. I've been thinking about the night of my accident, about lying in that OR while my son cut me open and saved my life. But he didn't, because you raised him to be better than me. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for a relationship. I just wanted to say thank you for being there when I wasn't, for giving him what I couldn't, for being the parent I should have been. Michael is an extraordinary man. That's because of you, not me. And I have to live with that. But at least I get to live. Because the boy I abandoned saved my life anyway. I hope that's enough. Emma." I read the letter twice. Then I folded it up and put it in a drawer with old bills and expired coupons and things I didn't know what to do with. She was right. It was enough, not good enough, not forgiveness enough. Just enough to acknowledge that we'd all survived the damage we'd done to each other. 5 years later, on a Tuesday in October, I got another call from the hospital. Not about Emma this time. About me. "Mr. Harrow, this is Dr. Sarah Harrow, Michael's wife. I need you to come to Boston Metro General. Your heart, you've been having symptoms, and your primary care doctor sent us your records. We need to see you immediately." I'd been ignoring the chest pain for 3 months, telling myself it was heartburn, stress, age, anything except what it was. Michael met me at the ER. He was visiting Boston for a conference, pure coincidence that he was in town. He took one look at my EKG, and his face went professional. "You need surgery," he said. "Bypass. Your main coronary artery is 90% blocked. We need to operate within 24 hours. "I'm fine." He grabbed my shoulders. "No, not like this. Not when we can fix it. I can't afford this, Michael. My insurance won't cover. I'll cover it. I don't care what it costs. You're having this surgery. I'm not your responsibility anymore." "Yes, you are. You'll always be my responsibility. That's what family means." So I had the surgery. Michael scrubbed in to observe, even though it wasn't his specialty. Sarah was there too, both of them watching as another surgeon opened my chest and fixed what was broken. I woke up in ICU with tubes in my throat and pain in my chest, and Michael sitting next to my bed. "You're going to be okay," he said. "Full recovery expected. 8 weeks rehabilitation. Sarah and I are taking a leave to come stay with you until you're back on your feet." "No." "Yes, and you don't get to argue. You spent 17 years taking care of me. Now it's my turn." "That's different." "No, it's exactly the same." He was right, of course. And for the first time in my life, I let someone take care of me instead of the other way around. They moved into my apartment. Well, Sarah stayed in a hotel, but Michael slept on my couch and made sure I did my rehab exercises and took my medications and didn't try to do too much too fast. It was strange, being the patient instead of the paramedic, being the one who needed help instead of giving it. But Michael was gentle about it, never making me feel weak or useless. One night, about 3 weeks into recovery, we were watching television, some medical drama that made us both laugh at the inaccuracies, when he said, "Emma's getting remarried." I didn't say anything. She wrote to me about it, asked if I wanted to come to the wedding, said she'd understand if I said no. "What did you say?" "Nothing yet. I wanted to talk to you first. It's your choice, kid, not mine. But I want your opinion." I thought about it, about Emma, about the choices she'd made, about the 17 years we'd all spent dealing with the fallout. "She's trying," I said finally. "Doesn't mean she's earned anything, but she's trying. So I should go." I didn't say that. I said she's trying. Whether that matters to you, that's your call. He was quiet for a moment, then, "I think I'm going to send her a card. Congratulations. Best wishes. Nothing more than that." "That's generous." "Maybe. Or maybe it's just closure. A way of saying, I see you trying, I acknowledge it, and that's all I've got." "That's fair." "Is it? Because it doesn't feel like enough. It doesn't feel like revenge or forgiveness or any of the things I thought I'd feel." "Maybe that's the point. Maybe the best revenge is just moving on, being happy, proving that you didn't need her to turn out okay." He smiled at that. "When did you get so philosophical?" "Heart surgery makes you think about mortality." "Don't joke about that." "Why not? I'm alive. That's worth joking about." We went back to watching the show. Some fictional surgeon was making a dramatic speech about saving lives and duty and sacrifice. Michael shook his head. "It's not really like that," he said. "The dramatic speeches, the perfect saves. Most of the time it's just doing your job, one patient at a time." "That's what I always told you." "I know. You were right." "Write that down. I want it on record." He laughed, and for a moment we were just two men sitting in a cramped apartment, watching bad television, grateful to be alive. 8 weeks later, I was back on my feet. Not 100%, I'd never be 100% again, but functional. Michael and Sarah went back to Seattle. Emma got remarried to someone who wasn't Richard. Life went on. And then, on a Thursday in March, I got a package in the mail. No return address, just my name and a Boston postmark. Inside was a key. My old apartment key, the one I'd given Michael 17 years ago when I pulled him out of that shelter. The one he'd carried ever since, even after he moved to Seattle. There was a note with it. "I don't need this anymore. I know where home is. Thank you for everything. M." I held that key for a long time, feeling the weight of 17 years in my palm. Thinking about a 15-year-old boy who'd been so broken he could barely stand, and the 32-year-old man he'd become. That was revenge. Not against Emma, not really. Against the idea that broken things stay broken. Against the belief that damage is permanent and love is conditional. Michael had proven that wrong just by existing. Just by growing up and saving lives, and becoming someone his mother never imagined he could be. And I'd helped him do it. Not because I wanted revenge, but because it was the right thing to do. Because someone had to. Because he deserved it. The key sat on my table now, next to the old photograph of 16-year-old Michael holding his EMT certificate. 2 artifacts from a past that had led to a present worth living. The call I'd been expecting came on a Sunday morning in July. Emma, calling from a number I didn't recognize. "Dad, it's me. I wanted to let you know. Richard died. Heart attack. He was only 56. Sorry to hear that. Are you?" "Not really, but I'm supposed to say it." She laughed, but it sounded sad. "I guess I deserve that. Look, I'm not calling for sympathy. I'm calling because when they were sorting through his things, they found something. Letters. That I'd written to Michael over the years but never sent. Richard had intercepted them, kept them hidden." "What did they say?" "That I missed him, that I was sorry, that I wanted him back. Richard never let me mail them. He said it was better for everyone if I just moved on. So I did. I moved on and pretended my son didn't exist." I sat down. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want Michael to know that I tried, that I didn't just forget about him, that every birthday, every Christmas, I thought about him and wrote letters I wasn't allowed to send. That doesn't change anything. I know, but it's the truth, and he deserves to know the truth. Then tell him yourself." "I can't. He won't talk to me. But he talks to you, so I'm asking, please, just let him know that I tried." I thought about it, about those 17 years, about the boy I'd raised, about the man he'd become, about whether the truth mattered when it came this late. "I'll tell him," I said, "but don't expect it to change anything." "I don't. I just want him to know." She hung up. I sat there for a long time, thinking about secrets and letters, and all the ways people hurt each other without meaning to. Or maybe meaning to. It was hard to tell sometimes. I called Michael that afternoon, told him what Emma had said, about the letters, about Richard, about everything. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Do you believe her?" "I don't know. Does it matter?" "Maybe. If she really tried, if she really wanted me back and Richard stopped her, then maybe she's not as much of a monster as I thought. Or maybe she's just trying to rewrite history, make herself feel better." "Yeah, maybe." More silence. Then, "What do you think I should do?" "I think you should do whatever lets you sleep at night. If you want to believe her, believe her. If you don't, don't. Either way, it doesn't change what happened or who you became." "Will you ever forgive her?" "No, but I don't carry her around anymore either. That's the best I can do." He sighed. "I might reach out to her. Not to forgive, just to acknowledge that she tried, even if it didn't matter." "That's your choice." "Yeah, I guess it is." We talked for a while longer about nothing important. Then I let him go, knowing he had decisions to make that I couldn't make for him. 3 months later, Michael invited me to Seattle for Thanksgiving. "Big family dinner," he said. "Sarah's parents, some colleagues, maybe a few others." I flew out, easier now that my heart was fixed, and arrived to a house full of people I didn't know. But Michael was there, and Sarah was there, and that was enough. Halfway through dinner, the doorbell rang. Michael got up to answer it, and when he came back, Emma was with him. I felt something cold settle in my chest. "I invited her," Michael said, looking at me. "I hope that's okay." It wasn't, but I nodded anyway. Emma sat at the far end of the table, quiet and uncomfortable. She didn't try to talk to me, didn't try to explain or justify. She just sat there, grateful to be included. After dinner, Michael pulled me aside. "I'm sorry I didn't warn you. I wasn't sure she'd actually come." "Why did you invite her?" "Because you were right. The best revenge is proving you didn't need her, and I wanted her to see that, to see the family I built without her, to see what she missed." "Is that really revenge?" "I don't know, but it feels like closure." I looked across the room at Emma. sitting alone with a cup of coffee. She looked older, smaller, less certain. Not the woman who'd abandoned her son, just a woman who'd made terrible choices and was trying to live with them. "She's your mother," I said. "Whatever that means now. If you want her in your life, that's your choice. But don't do it for me." "I'm not. I'm doing it for me, because I'm tired of being angry." "That's fair." We stood there for a moment, watching Sarah tell a story that made everyone laugh, watching Emma smile at the edges of the group, not quite part of it, but not entirely excluded either. "I'm proud of you," I told Michael, "not because you invited her, but because you figured out what you needed and made it happen. I learned that from you." "No, you learned that despite me." He smiled. "Same thing." Epilogue. That isn't an epilogue. That night, before I went back to my hotel, Emma stopped me at the door. "Thank you," she said, "for raising him, for being there, for everything. I didn't do it for you. I know, but thank you anyway." I looked at her, this woman who'd given birth to my grandson and then thrown him away, this woman who'd missed 17 years of his life and couldn't get them back. "He's a good man," I said, "better than either of us deserves." "I know. Don't waste this chance." "I won't." I walked to my hotel through Seattle streets, feeling the weight of 17 years finally lifting. Not gone, it would never be gone. But lighter, manageable. I'd pulled a boy out of a shelter and raised him to be a surgeon. I'd watched him save his mother's life, even though she didn't deserve it. I'd watched him build a family that included her despite everything. And now I was watching him let go of the anger that had defined him for so long. That was the real revenge. Not making her suffer, not making her pay. Just being happy, being successful, being loved. Proving that her worst decision couldn't break him. The key he'd sent me was still on my table back in Boston. A symbol of the home I'd given him when no one else would. But he didn't need that key anymore. He'd built his own home, made his own family, chosen his own path. And that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything. I flew back to Boston the next morning. Back to my apartment, my life, my routine. But something had shifted. Some weight I'd been carrying for 17 years had finally been set down. Michael called me a week later. "Emma's moving to Seattle," he said. "Nothing dramatic, just wants to be closer. Said she wants to try being a grandmother if Sarah and I ever have kids. How do you feel about that?" Cautiously hopeful, which is better than angry. "That's good." "Yeah, it is." We talked for a while longer, about his work, my health, Sarah's new position at the hospital. Normal family conversation, the kind we'd been having for 17 years. When we hung up, I sat in my chair and looked around my apartment. Small, cheap, clean enough. The same place I'd lived for 2 decades. The same place I'd brought a broken boy and watched him become a whole man. This was my revenge. Not violence or suffering or dramatic confrontations. Just this. A quiet life. A grandson who called me every week. The knowledge that I'd done something right when it mattered. Emma had thrown away her son, and I'd caught him. She'd chosen comfort over love, and I'd chosen responsibility. She'd walked away, and I'd stayed. And now, 17 years later, Michael was happy, successful, loved, complete. That was the best revenge I could have asked for. The key sat on my table, catching the light. A reminder that sometimes saving one life can change everything. That sometimes being there is enough. I picked up the key and put it in my pocket. Maybe I'd give it back to Michael someday. Or maybe I'd keep it as a reminder of the night I drove to a shelter and decided that one boy's life was worth fighting for. Either way, it was mine now. A symbol of the revenge I'd taken on neglect, on cruelty, on the idea that some people are disposable. Michael wasn't disposable. He never had been, and I'd spent 17 years proving it.